Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. I'm excited to have Amelia Cotter back. Hopefully, most of you will remember the regression that I did with author, poet, and storyteller Amelia Cotter. For those of you that don't know know you and haven't seen the other previous past life regression or other bits and pieces, but if you love folklore, if you love ghost and spooky stories, they really should know about you. But would you like to give like a brief introduction to yourself, please, Amelia?
Sure. I'm Amelia Cotter. I'm an author, poet, and storyteller. I'm based out of Chicago, Illinois. I'm originally from Maryland, and I've written 4, soon to be 5 books, even though I held up 10 fingers. And they range from everything from poetry to children's literature to research into folklore, haunted history, supernatural. My research primarily is my fascination with people's personal paranormal encounters. And I've been on some different TV shows and happy to be here today. Thanks for having me on again.
Oh no, it's absolutely wonderful. Because this system doesn't actually have Facebook messages come out. I'm just going to glance down every now and then so I can keep an eye on my Facebook messages that are coming
Sure.
through as well. So the regression last time round related to dreams that you used to have as a child about concentration camps, Auschwitz, which I couldn't pronounce just then, the concentration camps. Could you say about that and what it was like for you as a child, please?
Yeah. So when I was as far back as I can remember, I always had chronic nightmares, which I learned as an adult is not normal, that everybody doesn't have chronic nightmares. As a result, when I was in therapy in my mid 20s, talking about my issues with chronic nightmares, and I learned that there's like nightmare disorder. I actually stopped having nightmares every night, which was really a blessing. But I was plagued by nightmares when I was a kid. And before I was old enough to really know about the Holocaust or even have images of it in my mind, I I would dream about being in what later looked to me like images that I recognized of like concentration camps. Um, and I also had a fascination with it. So when I was a kid, old enough to read, then I started checking out books about the Holocaust, and I became interested in a lot of things. I actually became interested in German culture and modern German culture, and I ended up majoring in German in college and then studying abroad. And my interest in German and German history took me down a lot of different paths, but I still had that interest in the Holocaust and in World War II. And I visited Dachau, so I've been to that concentration camp memorial ground that they have there, which was really moving. Um, but so, yeah, so I always wondered, and when people talk about past lives, everybody always wants to have a really interesting, profound past life experience. So I thought to myself, like, well, to me, it would make sense if I was somehow involved, a victim. More so, hopefully in quotation fingers, than like a perpetrator, but having this idea that I was somehow part of a concentration camp. Usually I would have like strong images of myself like in a bed, like in a dusty, like dirty bunk bed. So in any case, I was skeptical of myself believing that, because people tend to think of like iconic moments in history, and then they reach for that as like, oh yeah, in my past life I was a soldier, I was a Native American warrior, I was a victim of the Holocaust. I've heard it a lot, and to me, it's very tropey. But I'm done, kind of over it, because I feel like I've had so many different connections with it now throughout my life, having been taken literally physically to a lot of these places and still feeling a deep connection with it, not by any means of my own heritage or past experiences from my family, something outside of myself. So yeah, so it came up in the past life regression. I was actually taken back to Germany in the past life regression in the 1930s, but in like a very picturesque, sort of idyllic kind of like upper middle class like situation. And yeah, I was kind of surprised. I didn't know if that's where my mind would take me, and it sort of ended with that place where somebody or person that I was experiencing or connecting with was there in a concentration camp. I also, in the pre-meditation that you gave me, that was like the practice round when you had told me like, here, get used to what this is going to be like, so do this for 30 minutes. Other images came up in my mind of like being in like a jet and like being a pilot and flying planes around really fast, and maybe it was in a war. So that's another like iconic sort of stock footage imagery that could pop up in my mind. I've also always had a fascination with aviation. So anyway, those two things were floating around in my head in conjunction with each other with World War II. So obviously I wasn't two people at the same time, but maybe just all of that sort of like lives somewhere in like the recesses of like my my unconscious.
Absolutely. I just want to say hi to Tracy, Patricia, and Laura. Laura actually came to one of my talks recently, and it's really nice that you've subscribed to this this YouTube channel. So I really appreciate it. Hi to all of you watching. There's a few silent people as well, so hello to everyone. Now, what is interesting is you did the pre one before the show just to make sure that you managed to get visualizations from past life experience. Then we did the live one where in the particular life in the 1930s you were the female, but then you actually used, which I was really pleased to hear, the regression MP3 again, and got yourself as being the male figure this time round. What do you think was going on there regarding if it could be a past life or whether it's more your subconscious mind, because it's quite, or maybe even picking up in the ether this experience which happened to these people? So what was your thoughts and feelings after doing that?
Like it's like you mentioned three things, like the possibility of a past life, the possibility of tapping into something within my own unconscious or subconscious mind, and then the idea that I was tapping into just connecting with another person or somebody that I do have a deep connection with that's not me, that's outside of myself, but still maybe a real person or real spirit or something like that. The thing, there were a couple things that made me uncomfortable about the past life regression itself that didn't add up for me, was that I was constantly looking as if it was a movie at this male that was either that I was like, oh, brother, husband, but seemed like a husband. This male figure that was in the past life regression, but I didn't really connect with the person or the woman or the body that I was in. I remembered her name as Mariana, and my mother's name is Marion. And so I'm not sure, like her first name is Marion. She goes by Louise. So I wasn't sure, again, if I was tapping into something that was more like, this was like my avatar, like my vessel. Mm-hmm. To kind of visit this time. This is my dog pitter-pattering around, in case you're wondering what that sound is.
Hello to the dog. What's his name?
Oscar.
Oscar. Hello to Oscar.
Thank you. We're having a cozy rainy day here in Chicago. So anyway, afterwards, I thought like that something didn't feel completely right about that. And then I dove back in and sort of like went back into this world. And I realized that if anything, here comes it. Thank you. That if anything, if it was in fact a past life experience, that I very likely was the man that I was watching. And I was imagining that I had an intimate relationship with him in some way, most likely because I actually was him, but I couldn't tap into how I was connected to that person. The name that came up and other details about him and even the way that he looked, it's hard to describe because it's so abstract, but like I've experienced those images and that name before, and then they kind of came together in this way that I was like, I do feel this person is real or was real. And I'm still discovering that, like uncovering that connection.
Fantastic. It's really interesting. What I actually found the most interesting, and I don't know if, because I know you know an awful lot about history, but that you mentioned the pharmacy that was in your regression was pink.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
never heard of a pink pharmacy before, but is that anything to your knowledge? Because that's sometimes the sort of thing that can come through that clinches that you've tapped into something.
I was doing research on, I have to look it up. I have my notes here like simultaneously on the screen. So I was doing research on the area that I had named. I said something like Gastenstrasse or something with a G and a EN sound, Strasse in Berlin. And there is a Gartenstrasse. So I was looking at old pictures of that and some new pictures, but it looks like it's not uncommon in certain areas of Berlin and maybe and other parts of Germany, like to have the outer walls of locations like painted like light pink. Um, and I don't know if that was a practice that dates all the way back to like the turn of the 20th century. But I do remember like, yeah, like seeing, I can see in my mind right now exactly how it was during the regression, like this, walking along this pink wall, this like textured pink wall, but then the inside of the, like the pharmacy itself looked very classical, traditional sort of, um, like European or even like what you would see in like an old American movie type of pharmacy.
Yeah. That was the thing which really got my interest. And you also mentioned two names, Ariel and Geller. If you can touch a bit more on that as well, just a little bit more, please. So
Yeah, so those are the
okay.
names that popped up into my head immediately. My husband pointed out, because we were talking about this and going over my notes and trying to make things connect or disconnect. He mentioned that Uri Geller is a famous magician. I don't know if his name was Uriel, but that would make sense. Uri Geller. And Jonathan was like, what if that was a signal? What if that was your unconscious mind signaling you that this experience is an illusion? That not necessarily all of it, but that the way that you were experiencing it as it was like an illusion. And that kind of blew my mind. I was like, whoa, like our brains do really cool stuff. That some of these things in and of themselves are still sort of, can be considered paranormal or supernatural or supernormal or whatever in their own way. Just this sort of like tapping into different areas, different uncharted areas of the abilities of our minds. So, in any case, I still feel strongly about the name Ariel, like very strongly about that. And that is a Hebrew name. Um, and the last name popped into my head with it, so maybe it was because my brain picked up on a similar sounding name and like uh, meshed the two together.
Absolutely. Out of the whole experience for you, because I felt quite bad afterwards, you were quite emotional at the end of it, but was there anything that
Yeah.
really stood out for you that was quite surprising and just you would think, I was not expecting that at all?
Yeah, so I didn't expect to cry through 40 of the 60 minutes of the of the like hypnosis experience, like really cry, like ugly cry. Um, and again, that was fascinating. I was tapping into something that could have been deep inside of myself. I could have been tapping into a connection with my mother or somebody else in my own family. We have a history of, um, on both sides of my family, we have a history of like addiction and mental illness. And I had felt strongly that this woman's body that I was in, that she was struggling or suffering with some type of mental illness or severe depression that prevented her from fully experiencing the life that she had around her. Like there was a moment when I felt that she had lost a baby and I started to cry. And I was thinking, she's not sad about that fact in and of itself as much as I'm picking up on these emotions of like the fear of being pregnant in the first place. So like this, which is obviously common, but like this woman felt very detached from her own life and very scared. and very dependent on whoever this male person was, Ariel. Like she was very dependent on him to take care of her. And then she later was ill, like very ill, physically ill. Um, so, and again, like all of that detail and all of those emotions that came up, just kind of out of the clear blue sky, I didn't feel connected to her as if I was her, unless that's me now. That's like an unconscious projection of like my shadow self, which is possible. And I don't know if this comes up with you when you, if people go into analysis with you like this with other past life regressions, like um, if people experience these types of like layers, it's like this like layer cake of like all this different stuff. But I wanted to explore that also with myself, and possibly with having tapped into the emotions of somebody. That was okay. That was almost the closest thing to me tapping into something from a past life, because it was as if I was tapping into like an ancestral line of my own family and feeling emotions of people that have come before me, because I was very I didn't, I have a I don't have a very close relationship with my parents, but I feel a closeness with like my grandmother who died when I was very young. I feel a closeness with my mom now that I'm getting older and understanding more about, who her life and who she is, and etc. So that whole nugget feels to me like almost separate from the other things that were going on, but that I felt and still feel very strongly about, and I have a lot more to explore there.
Brilliant. I just want to also say hello to Darren, Helen, Lorian, and Moira as well. That's in the chat that actually made themselves known at this particular time. Now, I know from your ghost hunting, you've managed to tap into other spiritual things before. One of them being the most compelling, which I have heard you talk about before, is the child and seeing the person in the window with no face. And
Yeah.
also, you've been on other paranormal investigations. I mean, a lot of people will know from the R.I.P files and other paranormal programs. Tapping in on that sort of level with the past life to something which could be more ghost related. Did you feel a difference inside?
Oh, that's interesting. So the physical feeling of connectedness that I've had before with Walter, that ghost that I saw when I was a kid, which was the only time that I've ever seen like a full bodied apparition, um, that produces like a physical sensation of like static electricity. In other times in my life when I felt like I was experiencing him, I've also smelled like the old smell of like an abandoned house, or like wood with water damage. And um, that's a big mystery to me as well, because I have no connection to this person other than having seen their spirit and explored their home, but having felt like they have come with me along my journey in life, but not in like a creepy, scary way. Wondering what that represents also. But for me, uh, it all sort of also lives in the same place, because I still uh, I'm learning and discovering more about my feelings about the spirit world, and um, how what spirits are, and how they are real. Um, and just the idea that like, not that our thoughts are real. I'm going to start sounding like I've been like eating like magic brownies or something, and like talking about like the cosmos or whatever. And that's not what I mean, but like, um, that our subconscious minds, our unconscious minds are tapped into a lot of knowledge, um, things that are real, images and people and things, connections that we feel that are real. Like to me, Ariel is real, whether he is somebody truly from the past or a creation of my own mind. And people who are into the paranormal know that in the past there have been things like the skull experiment, where people were able to create a ghost, and create, like ghostly activity and things like that. Um, and so Walter feels completely separate and outside of who I am, even though he's connected to my life. Whereas this past life regression sort of bubbled some things up to the surface that are very real, but also very much a part of me. And that can be open to interpretation.
I'm going to have to ask you about Walter, because I know we spoke about your experience last time round, but there's going to be people here that haven't heard that. What's Walter about? They want to know about Walter.
Sure.
But what I wanted to ask you quickly first is that with the regressions that I do, I take people through, with asking permission and everything, through to the death experience. Was the death experience for you like what you would have imagined death to be like, or was it actually quite different? Because for a lot of people, it can be quite different, but I just wanted to get your thoughts and feelings on it.
Yeah, it wasn't at all what I imagined. And I don't think often or imagine often what death will look like or what the afterlife will look like. It's more, when I visualize it, it's like a cheesy sort of image of like a colorful nebula and little like wisps of light that is like me and my friends and family and whatever, floating through space-time. I visualized after the actual part where you took me through my death, I was floating out in dark water under like a dark sky with a few stars, not many. And it was very quiet, but it was very peaceful. So I'm terrified of water. I can swim and everything, but I'm not like going swimming in the ocean and, stuff like that. And so even like swimming in the local creek, it like gives me the willies, right? I don't swimming in the Lake Michigan. Oh my gosh, but that's legit creepy. But anyway, so that would not be something that to me would feel comfortable. And I felt this just like floating along, like sort of in this like liminal space. Like this isn't heaven or hell or anything. It's just kind of like where I am right now. And I was very calm. And it felt okay. Like it felt like it was right for me to be there.
That's good. Is there anything about the regression that I haven't asked you yet that you think is an important point before I start talking about your work? So for about an hour, so I wanted the first 30 minutes to be about the regression, but then talking a little bit about your work then after.
So I guess I think we covered most of it. And I know that if people want to go and watch my past life regression and see me cry for 40 minutes, that you posted, I had written a little paragraph that you posted to go with the video about all the different names and the different places and how they were real and connected, which was very cool. So no matter what the circumstances were, we were able to go back and validate almost everything that I talked about. And the timeline also made sense logically too, which was very cool. And I very much felt like I truly was under hypnosis, which was, to me, I was like, oh, I don't know if he's going to be able to hypnotize me. I'm sure everybody thinks that. And then I was like,
yes.
Right. But we mentioned the concept. For me, it was like the three concepts that you had brought up as like looking at it critically, thinking about like whether or not this person I experienced, or multiple people, since there were kind of two characters in my past life regression, which were Mariana and Ariel, were they real people and are they from an actual past life of mine? Are they real because they are a creation of my mind? And I do a lot of journeying. So I think it's important to say that I do like visualizing meditations. And so I've become kind of good at that over the years. And like journeying, for people who don't know a lot about it, is when you go on these, it's like a meditation excursion where you sort of, you receive and process like involuntary images, almost like you're watching a movie. And there's a lot of symbolism in that. And, it still requires a lot of technique and sort of control and practice. But anyway, part of what I did later with the other the follow-up meditation was to take it as a journeying approach and to sort of let the information be given to me by this person who literally like he kind of like took me by the hand and was showing me like, this, I'm Ariel, I'm you. And just, it sounds kind of crazy in that, like when it's described that way, but it was very profound. And then it really started to make sense. And the other thing, of course, like, are these like the possibility that these are spirits of other people that are sort of coming out of the ether, like you said, and what do they want? Are they like hungry spirits? So I I've been listening to a lot of the Astonishing Legends podcast lately, and they've had some really great episodes about these very topics. One of them is the Siren Call of Hungry Ghosts, based on a book, I think, of the same name. And just really interesting food for thought of how of approaching like the richness of the spirit world and the possibilities of the spirit world beyond what we generally take at face value or pop culture value as far as like ghosts and hauntings.
Perfect. Do you actually feel that, before we move on to your work, that anything's changed? Because sometimes people, when they have a regression, they notice, because you mentioned fear of water. I mean, the last thing I want you to do is to say, oh, yeah, this changes. It happened. And I know you wouldn't anyway. But sometimes people can actually find like there's a positive difference from actually experiencing life as somebody else. Like, I've actually had people that have lost the fear of water, or some people even lost the fear of dying, which is a wonderful thing for people to actually say to me. And anything you noticed at all?
Well, yes. So it has been, yeah. So without going into a lot more background detail that is also just very abstract and probably would only make sense to me, like
Okay.
it synthesized a lot of things for me. Um, and I've gotten a lot of joy and fulfillment out of researching these different avenues and sensing that these people or this person, especially Ariel, are real, and that I have a connection to them, and that I have like homework to do, like I need to continue working on this. um, Gives me a real sense of purpose also. And it's changed how I view, I'm in the midst of, like I said, like this rapid, um, not rapid, but just like this evolving period in my life of looking at the of paranormal stuff, differently.
Fantastic. Also, as well, there's another Patricia and Karis have joined us. So I wanted to say hello to yourselves too. Thank you for joining us. Now I wanted to mention your work, and I think because Walter was mentioned, I think that it would be a real shame for people that haven't heard about your experience with Walter if they didn't know about it. So you're happy to go into that, please?
Sure. I have told the story hundreds of times, and I think my dog's about to start barking. So if that happens, I'll fix it. But these our enemies, are walking by the door. Um, I was fascinated by ghosts and ghost stories since I was a little kid. And when I was about 11 years old, my dad was working at a restaurant in Moncton, Maryland, on what was called My Lady's Manor, which was this large expanse of land owned by the third Lord Baltimore, Charles Calvert, in the early to mid 1700s. And he built this big expanse of land for his wife, and there were farms and houses. And the restaurant itself had originally been a horse stable, and later it was a tavern, and later a restaurant. Uh, and even today, the whole area is known as like horse country, and it's a very beautiful part of the state of Maryland. So so the restaurant was supposed to be haunted, and then right outside of the parking lot of the restaurant was a little row of houses located right along the road. One of them, which is now abandoned, very interestingly, was occupied by people who were living at the working at the restaurant. And then the next one over was this creepy old gray abandoned house that the locals referred to as Walter's house. Walter was the name of every ghost. So everybody just called the ghost Walter, because there had been a story that one time uh, some poor guy in the cleaning crew was working early in the morning when a woman came up to him dressed in like period clothing, like with, hoop skirt and everything, and asked him, where's Walter? And he shrugged and said, I don't know. And she, sort of had a puzzled look on her face, and then turned and then walked into a wall and vanished, and that he like quit on the spot. So after that story started to circulate, everybody called the ghost Walter. And there was another abandoned house down the way. That one was so abandoned and dilapidated that you couldn't go inside. So Walter's house was accessible, and my parents allowed little old me to explore the inside of it. And I became fascinated with the house. And I felt this sense of thrill, but also like responsibility. Like I'm going to research the house and protect the house and learn all about its ghosts. And this is like 11-year-old Amelia, like being really like serious about like being a budding ghost hunter. And I experienced a few odds and ends in the house of like weird sounds and, you know, strange things like that. But then I remember one day I was leaving the house with my mom and a friend from 6th grade who had come to my like ghost hunting presentation that I gave for like my English class. He wanted to see the house. So, you know, we drove out there. And when we left, I remember saying out loud, like, I just want to see Walter one time. I would give anything just to see this ghost. And as we were leaving, we just looked up at the house, you know, to kind of say goodbye. And up in one of the attic windows, there was 2 attic windows. It's that classic sort of architectural style, these little eye windows. Leaning out of one of the windows was a man, or like a boy or a young man, um, that looked, you know, he was completely white, but he did have shadows, like texture in his clothing. So I could tell he was wearing suspenders and pants and like a cuffed collared shirt. And I could see the detail of his hair, but he had no face. Um, it wasn't like scary no face, like a gaping hole or anything. It was just a white space. Um, and I was not afraid. I was completely exhilarated and like enthralled and spellbound. And I was looking up and I got this like swirling feeling of static electricity in my stomach and all over my body. And we were pulling away very slowly, and his head just followed the car. And it was just like he, even though I couldn't see his face, I got this impression that he was surprised that we could see him, but kind of excited. Like, and he was watching us drive away. And like, I was looking up at him, presumably making eye contact. And then we drove away. And my mom didn't see it. Graham and I both saw it. And I asked him, I said, okay, what did you see? And he described the exact same thing. And my mom got really excited. She was like, should I go back? Like, should we turn around? Should I put it in reverse? And I remember saying, no, don't. I don't want to go back and have nothing be there. Part of me doesn't want to go back and have the ghost still be there, but I was like, I don't want to go back. I want to preserve that moment in time forever because it was the coolest thing. And nothing like that has happened since. And I always felt they ended up tearing the house down about a year later. I always felt a deep connection with it, with that area and with that spirit in a non creepy or harmful way, like not in a parasitic sense, but just that he has almost become part of this like lexicon of guardian. You know, people call them by different things, guardian angels or spirit guides, or just people that come and go to watch over us. That he's like there if I need him. But at other times in my life when I have been in crisis, I have felt his presence in a comforting way. So it was very cool. And I think, because I know that folks who are watching like in the UK are like probably wondering how old the house was, because things here just aren't that old. But the house was probably so the, you know, My Lady's Manor was, you know, mid 1700s. So the house itself was from probably like the 1750s, 1770s, which is getting pretty old for us. Along the East Coast, you get some stuff that's like from the late 1500s and 1600s too, but that's rare. And then the last items that were in the house before, because there was just stuff everywhere from when it had been abandoned, the most recent items were from like 1954. So the house had been abandoned for a very long time too.
That's pretty cool. And it's nice
Yeah.
that you felt that presence, as you said, through times of crisis as well. If that had happened to you now, because at 11 years old you didn't want to go back, either if he was there or wasn't there, do you think you would have acted the same now, or do you think, oh, let's go back and take a look?
There's no way on planet Earth that I would ever say out loud again, like, I really hope that I see a ghost, because I don't think that, like, I don't possess the same type of constitution now where I could like take it. I don't think I could take it psychologically. I definitely, but if I did see something, I would want to go back. Now I would want to go back and say, yes, I have to know that I'm not crazy. But that's because I think I'm more skeptical now than I used to be. When I was 11 and everything was in front of me and I was innocent and fascinated, I was like, wow, ghosts, come to me. Cool. The world is the coolest place ever. Now, also, after years and years of like, I do some paranormal investigation, but mostly just being around and in environments of discussion and study and whatever of paranormal stuff, I have so much more baggage that if I saw something, I would have to go back and like prove and then double, triple prove that it was real before I would let myself think that it was real, which is really robbing myself too of an experience, because it's okay, I think, to get excited and to hope that something is real, even if it's not.
No, absolutely. Just want to say hello to Dave and Liz, who have now joined in watching as well. So hello. Um, so I know that you also love folklore, and that's a big subject of yours as well. If I'm remembering rightly, that it's the paranormal, ghost, spooky things came first, and then folklore came afterward. Have I got that right? Or
I
around the
guess
same?
that's probably true. It might have been simultaneous. So, no, you're right, because you know me better than me. Because I loved ghost stories when I was a kid. There was no, I loved it. I did, there was no reason. I was just like born interested in ghosts and the supernatural. When I was in high school and into college and I started studying history, I also majored in history. And I became fascinated with the local legend around town, like in Bel Air, Maryland. There was some really interesting history, and the legends and folklore about it were really cool. So, you go into the abandoned house because you heard that somebody murdered their whole family there, which 9 times out of 10, they haven't. That's just a story, but that's important because that's the folklore, right? There's a scary place on the corner. This is the story about it. Then you go inside and then you see if there are ghosts, right? So there's just, again, these different layers of discovery and like and study. But yes, so folklore and urban legends, and then other types of non-paranormal related folklore also, with which there's like another whole world that has interested me as well. And it's also been a convenient way for me to package myself as somebody who's um, not only a paranormal investigator, because that's like, I'm a paranormal investigator on TV kind of thing, but like not, it's not everything that I do. And it's not really something that interests me in particular, like using equipment to find evidence and prove something, like, is not really what I care as much about.
I saw an interview where you were asked about your favourite folklore story, but the question I wanted to ask, is there a folklore story that you've maybe not been a favourite, but you've come back time and time again to research, and what was it about it that made you go back to that particular story or group of stories over and over again?
Boy, that's interesting. What was my answer in that other interview? Do you remember? Or if it was, I can't.
Uh,
So, 'cause
I
that's a
can't remember
really
off
good.
the top.
That's fine. That's fine. I can't either. Um, I used to have, it's changed over time. So when I was younger, I did a lot of research into the Jericho covered bridge in Harford County, Maryland. Covered bridge stories, especially in the US, tend to have the same types of stories surrounding them, no matter what their location is. that like a distraught mother threw her baby over the bridge and then jumped over it herself, that people can be seen hanging from the bridge, that there's a creature living under the bridge, and that you drive onto the bridge and you stop your car and you flash your lights 3 times, or you put your car in idle and then or neutral and then something pushes the car. Just all of these different stories that always relate back to you know these same folklore bits, and the same type of thing, right? A covered bridge, which is which are beautiful and quaint during the day and then spooky at night. For a long time, that was my thing. Lately, my thing has been doing research into the folklore surrounding Al Capone. So that is
Okay.
something that I've become more interested in uh, ever the day that I set foot on Chicago soil. Being somebody who's interested in history and ghosts, you hear a lot about Capone. They sell a lot of Capone tchotchkes downtown everywhere you go. And when I talk to people from around the world, they associate deep dish pizza and Al Capone with Chicago, like, period, right? That's, everybody says so. And there's a lot of places that he supposedly went to or owned in his life, and that he haunts now that he's no longer here. And so, one of the things that I've sort of tasked myself with on the side is doing research into why, how, and why that is. If he is actually haunting any of those places, did he visit most of these places during his lifetime? Um, and why do we have this fascination with him? Where, of course, it's easy, like from a business perspective. Oh yeah, Al Capone used to come here all the time. Well, then yeah, it gets people in the door, right, to drink at your bar, eat at your restaurant. But you know, I'm just kind of going down that rabbit hole of like this cultural fascination with Capone.
Fantastic. Just want to say hi to Damien, who's now watching. Um, has there been any extra information that's come up through your research about Capone that was a complete surprise to you, that you thought, I would not have expected that bit of information to come out?
I've had a lot of surprises with Capone. Oh my, where to start? So, one thing that I learned, this is kind of a weird thing, but it's the first thing that popped into my head, was that most people are aware that like he died, in his late 40s from complications, likely from complications that were related to late stage syphilis. I learned that he contracted it sometime when he was a teenager, um, and not later in his life. Like, we think of him as being sort of like this sleazy character. Um, he very well may have engaged in sleazy activities, and I'm not here to judge, but learning that he contracted it when he was a teenager sort of changed my opinion about him, if that makes any sense. And then I also learned all about how syphilis works and how you can survive without being treated for apparently 30 odd years. So that is sort of like a its own thing. But I've learned that he was like very involved with and close with his family, close to his son and his wife. Whatever his other illicit activities were, he was like a family man, very family oriented. um, and he did a lot of, like, he gave back to the community a lot. So a lot of people joke that like he provided a service during Prohibition, since he was able to get alcohol into people's hands. In a lot of ways, that is true. Alcohol consumption increased here in the U.S. during Prohibition. And we never learned, like, Americans never learn our lessons about being too puritanical, right? So we he also, like, he helped a lot of jazz musicians out in the early days, like in the glory days of jazz here in Chicago. He developed uh, soup kitchens and things like that. So he was, I don't know. So it's not to negate the terrible things that he did. It's just an additional part of who he was that shows that he was much more complex than the way he's portrayed in movies, and or the way that we look at like mobsters and gangsters in like pop culture and television. We really have very little information about him that tells how he was behind those closed doors. We have the more public information about just, the way his family describes him and things like that. I'm still, at the tip of the iceberg with a lot of things, but just learning about him as a human being has been kind of fascinating. And then learning mostly about all the places that he's not actually haunting or never actually went to in his lifetime has been interesting. But yeah, there's a lot of people out there selling the Capone name for their own uh, gains, I guess.
That's absolutely fine. Um, and what I would say, I think you're quite similar to me with like the regression. You sort of an explorer into the paranormal and things spooky, and also know you love spooky stories as well. Um, I know you're kind of not really defined on what maybe a ghost is, but do you swing to any particular theory about ghosts, what they could be? Because I know you do believe in ghosts, because I heard you say you believe in ghosts, but some people say it's stone tape, some people say it is a spiritual dead person, or do you think it's like a whole mixture of different things and it's not just one size fits all?
Yeah, so I've had, um, I know I said this already, but just like a revolution and an evolution in my thinking over the last year or two. I've opened my mind a lot. I think it's safe to say that, we don't know what ghosts are. We have names. We have names like ghost and demon and whatnot that we attribute to certain types of activity. Um, and sometimes we have cultural bias or we have religious bias that reinforces our ideas about this activity. And like, I think adhering ourselves to those things is dangerous. I don't like the idea of doing that. So I like to stay in the safe camp of being like, I believe in ghosts, but I don't know what they are. Um, my mind isn't deviating from that more than I'm just opening up my mind to the idea that it is more like what you said, where there's just a lot going on. Like it's much more complex than we actually think it is. Um, and uh, yeah, like I need to get like my elevator speech together because I know this question comes up all the time and I'm always like blindsided, but it's hard to articulate, but I think my idea of what ghosts could be is expanding. We'll leave it at that.
No, that's absolutely fine. There's also some people say about Halloween's a wonderful time, and Halloween's always a really great time. I mean, you've written plenty of spooky books yourself, and a children's book which we spoke about last time, Breakfast with Bigfoot. What's your plan so people can either tune in, because I know you've got other interviews and other things coming up for the Halloween holiday?
So this weekend, I have a big ghost tour coming up with like a huge group of students from DePaul University. And I'm hoping it doesn't rain, but even if it rains, we'll have a good spoopy time. And we're going to do the whole Lincoln Park area, which is close to where I live. I live in East Lakeview for folks who may know where that is. And all of, Lincoln Park, before it was everything that it is today, it was Chicago City Cemetery. And we'll also pass by some other iconic sites like the St. Valentine's Day Massacre site and the Biograph Theater where John Dillinger was shot. And they're all basically in this neighborhood. So that's going to be fun. Halloween night itself, I have set aside just for me. So my husband and I are going to do what we do every year, which is like be at home in our jammies watching scary movies and eating candy. I try to
Best way
like
to
save
spend it.
Halloween. um, I try to save that just for like cozy, nostalgic night and not like crazy events or parties or anything like that. Um, and then mostly like the bigger events have either been canceled or pushed to spring because of COVID stuff. So I've done a few events this fall, but it hasn't been, I was about to say as bad, just because it's usually like really just like a stressful like whirlwind time, but it hasn't been as crazy as it has been in the past. So the next big thing that I'll be doing will be in February in Savannah, Georgia at the Haunted Savannah Paracon.
Sounds brilliant. Just have to say hi to Tracy. I think this Tracy popped back in again. Mary and Linda, thank you for joining. Now, you've got books. You do like the spooky tour that you've got coming up. If people are interested in your work, particularly getting hold of your books, you just could do an overview of all of them so people can go, well, I'd like to tap into that one, and
Yeah.
be good, please.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and I forgot to mention that last year, one of the most successful things I ever did, which was awesome, was these like Facebook Live storytelling sessions where I would like read scary stories. So I had a whole series of that last year during the lockdown, which was, I had a lot of fun doing that. I don't have time now that back to work full time and all that kind of stuff too. I don't have time for that, but I'm planning on doing like one Christmas spooky campfire tales type of thing sometime in December. If people want to find out the date that I picked, because I haven't picked it yet, you can check out my website, which is ameliacotter.com. And that has all the information too about all of my books, my appearances, poetry, stories, all the things that I've ever done and will be doing in the upcoming near future. So that's ameliacotter.com. I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook fan page. I'm on Instagram now. Like, I'm brand new to Instagram, dragging myself into the 21st century, or I guess the second decade of the 21st century, whatever. I have Twitter. I do have a YouTube channel, but it's like mostly videos of where you can watch interviews and things that I've done in the past. I'm very easy to connect with. You can also email me at Amelia M. Cotter, M as in man, at gmail.com. And yeah, so I love connecting with people. So yeah, folks should always feel free to reach out.
I know you always make it very clear to put the M in the Amelia Cotter because you're just always saying that somebody else, another Amelia Cotter, will be getting your emails and things like
and
that.
she's never forwarded me any of my own emails, and she never responds to the emails that she gets.
Right.
Maybe the email address is no longer in use, but they do go to a legit Amelia Cotter at gmail.com. And I'm sure she's up to her eyeballs, sick of getting weird ghost related emails.
I know your close friends don't talk about the paranormal, if I'm remembering rightly, with you. It's more other people that talk about it. Do you have like a story that somebody just sort of said to you you're happy to sort of share now? Obviously, they're happy that comes. Well, that's a really interesting one. Just stories that you might get emailed through to you from just people like me and everybody else watching at the moment.
Yeah, it's weird because it's mostly I'm not friends other than being like social media and like I guess business friends, or however you want to call it, with like other paranormal minded folks. I don't have like a circle of friends really that is like super into it, and they all know that I'm into it and that like I do stuff with it. And sometimes after a couple of drinks, they'll start talking about it just a little bit, or they'll tell me a story. Most recently, I had a friend who told me that her little daughter, who's now like 2 or 3 years old, has been running into their room at night. They just moved into this new house July of last year. So she had been living in their old house. And both of these houses were like brand new, but their old house for like the first 2 years of her life. And now here she runs into their room at night saying that the shadow man is like in her, coming out of her closet. And she was telling me that she would watch her on like the baby monitors that they have, and they have a couple different ones set up, so it's almost like CCTV, of her like sitting up and looking over towards the closet. And then sometimes she'll even go towards the closet and then like look and then run away really fast, and then come into their room and say like talk about this, like the shadow man is back. And so of course her next question is, what do I do about it? And so I was like, oh my God, I'm not I don't know. I only go as far as the first part with the stories. Like I'm not so much the like what do I do about the ghost in my house part, but I was able to talk with her a little bit about that. But she was like she opened up about that. Most of the stories I get, even when I worked at the Adler Planetarium for 6 years, not the most like ghost supernatural friendly, unless you're talking about like Doctor Who or something, crowd of people. When people really needed help, they would come to my desk, and it was always about something that was happening to their young child. Like my young child is seeing something in their room. They're talking about stuff they shouldn't know about. And the first time they said it, I thought it wasn't a big deal. And now it's like the third, fourth, fifth time, and it's the same person coming out of the same hole in the floor. Amelia, what can I do? Help me. So that's that's always an interesting interesting to hear.
Absolutely. I've got two more questions because I know you're incredibly busy, and we said we'll be on for about an hour today. The first question I wanted to ask is, last time we were on, you gave the wonderful quote, "What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?" And I really try and live my life through that. Because of that inspirational quote, either yourself telling that to somebody and they've managed to create something amazing themselves, or is there anything in the pipeline for you that you would think, this is my next goal, that I'm going to go for, that you would like to sort of share with us and get
Sure.
excited about?
One of my big dreams is about to come true, which is this poetry book I've been working on for an eternity. And it's like a little itty bitty poetry chapbook that's like barely 40 pages long. And you'll be able to sit down and read it in a half hour. But it's been this labor of love I've been working on forever, and it's finally going to be published. So I am excited about that. But right now, the other thing I'm that's hopefully coming down the pipeline is that I'm working on developing a television show or limited series for a major network here in the U.S.
Stuff.
Or possibly abroad in the UK. So I literally cannot give any details about it. People always give vague information about things that may or may not happen, but hopefully I will know sometime in the next 3 months what's going on with that. And that journey of doing this has also been extremely cool, and it's turned over some new leaves and opened some new doors for me no matter what. So wish me luck there, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of luck. I know we'll be watching, be wishing you lots of luck as well for that. Before I go, is there anything that, I mean, it's been an hour, so there might be several things, but is there like one specific thing that you'd really like to say that I haven't asked you during this interview now?
No, thank you. I think I covered everything, especially with regard to like my philosophical musings about like the past life regression and everything. I
Thank you.
think we covered a lot of that, and I still have so much more to discover. So of course I'll keep you posted.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the time.
Yeah.
Thank you as everybody watching. If I didn't give your name a shout, I do apologise.
Yeah. Thank you
And
all.
thank you so much. And I'll turn off now. I'll just speak to you for, it'll literally be just a couple of minutes. I won't be speaking to you for ages after, but just to sort of say thank you after I finish
Yeah, for
this.
sure.
This seems it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Amelia. And whatever you're doing at the moment, have a nice